You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Athan Hristodulu.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Athan Hristodulu. It's November 4th, 2021. It is Thursday, so you know what that means. Kickoff for week number 9 starts tonight in about 8 hours or so, roughly, give or take. I got a preview for tonight's game between the New York Jets visiting the Indianapolis Colts. Should be a pretty decent matchup here. The teams match up a little bit better than some people might realize going into this game. While both teams are sitting at pretty poor records at this point, the Jets are sitting at 2-5. The Colts are sitting at 3-5. Not a ton of wins between these two teams. Far more losses, obviously, between the two, but a pretty solid matchup to get the week going. And obviously, the red-hot Mike White making his second start of his career after lighting up the world and leading his Jets to a win over the Bengals. So, should be a fun matchup to watch. Some questions as to maybe, is Mike White the guy? I've been seeing a lot of people talk about this all week long. We'll discuss that a little bit and obviously my key points and predictions and things. So, if you like what you're watching, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let's get into it, shall we? So, Thursday night, Jets at Colts. Not the matchup you'd probably really look forward to, if I'm being quite frank, and I am a Colts fan, so trust me, I get it. If it's not really one you're looking to watch, I don't blame you. However, there is some intrigue going into this game. Obviously, the Mike White thing is a big one, but also, where do the Colts stand after falling to the Titans again, losing to them twice this year, being swept completely? This puts them kind of in a position where their backs are against the wall, and they need to start winning some games if they want to keep any playoff hopes alive. Meanwhile, the Jets, who are missing their number 2 overall pick, Zach Wilson, allowing their backup Mike White to come in and take his place, and he just completely lit up the world last week. You have a lot of questions. Now, the first key point for this game that I'm going to discuss with you guys has got to be Mike White versus the Colts defense overall. Now, I have some statistics thrown together here to kind of explain this for you guys, is what I was trying to say. Now, let's just kind of look at some stuff. The big keynote from just this past week was obviously Mike White himself having a day, and I mean a day at that, led the league in passing yards with 405. He is the, second quarterback, almost at first there, second passer since 1950 to throw for 400-plus yards in his first career start. The only other quarterback to do that is quarterback Cam Newton. While the Jets only have 1,600 yards of total passing yards and only 8 touchdowns, the 1,600 yards, the number exactly is 1616, so 1,616, ranks 30th in the league. The touchdowns, they're at 8th. They're tied for 25th with, I think 3 other teams or so, maybe 2 other teams, something like that. White showed he can be effective against the Bengals, and a lot more effective than this passing offense has been through the last few weeks. Now, the big thing that I think everyone's kind of missing from that game and against the Bengals, and something that I don't even really think I touched on myself, is that while the Bengals defense has been pretty good, their pass defense has been pretty average. They're right in the middle of the pack in terms of passing yards allowed per game. So it wasn't actually as impressive as it may have looked in totality with how well the Bengals have been playing. They've let up a lot of yards. They've let up a fair amount of touchdowns through the air. So when you look at the game and you go, wow, Mike White was able to put up 405 yards, don't get me wrong, incredible and a big surprise. But when you look at it, between, because we don't necessarily know, we only have one game worth of example to kind of go by, but it's not, I don't want to say not surprising, but there was more of a possibility of it happening than people might have actually initially thought with Mike White coming in. I think the biggest precursor to that game was the first touchdown pass he threw the week prior when the Jets were getting blown out with the Patriots. That was a big-time throw he made, and I thought it was a really impressive throw. And when he hit that, I even said it at the time, I was watching with some people, I was like, wouldn't it be incredible if he just came out here, finished his drive off, and hit a crazy touchdown throw? And he did. And then obviously at that point, the game was already kind of out of whack, and they were really far behind, and things were just continuing to fall apart for the Jets against the Patriots. But when he had time to prepare, get himself ready, he made a lot more of those big-time throws. Yeah, he had a couple of interceptions, but he showed that he has the ability to play in this league, at least to an extent. I don't really think that's a fluke game. I mean, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but you can't just put up 405 yards by accident against an NFL team. Like, that can't just be a stroke of luck. There has to be some sort of talent and preparation behind that. Now, when you look at what the Colts' pass defense is, with all of that said, it's actually not in a great position right now. Both starting safeties are going to be out. Kari Willis has been ruled out. Blackman's been out already for like a couple of weeks now at this point. And they've already allowed the second most passing touchdowns in the league at 19. So there's actually a little bit of cause for concern when you look at this matchup here. Mike White showed he could throw the football. He had a really good, rapport or kind of whatever you want to call it with the running back Carter there. They were really just like hooking up left and right, making plays all over the field, leading Carter to have, I think it was somewhere around like 140 some odd yards total offense altogether with the touchdown that he scored as well. So, I mean, there is a little bit of concern. Secondary's banged up. They weren't really doing great as is for over the last however many weeks. And again, they've let up 19 passing touchdowns through the air. That is a cause for concern for somebody who just threw, 3 touchdowns last week? 4 touchdowns last week? I don't remember the exact number of touchdowns Mike White threw, but he threw a lot against the Bengals. So there is a little bit of concern there. Mike White has an opportunity, especially with even more preparation now as being the starter for another week. He has a good chance to maybe put up some more numbers. Now, my next key point, and this one is on the flip side of things, this is for the Colts here. The Colts have a good opportunity to get after what has been a solid run defense overall, but not necessarily the best, but also not the worst. Jonathan Taylor's been a stud since he's locked up the running back 1 position over there in Indianapolis. He's averaging 5.4 yards per attempt, which is a really good average. On top of that, he has 6 touchdowns on the ground, and that's just this year alone, not career, but just this year alone. So he's boasted, and on top of that, the big thing that I think really needs to be noted here, he has the longest run of the season. So not only does he have the ability to run between the tackles, he's really good running outside as well. And when he gets into some open space, more often than not, he's gone. He ran for an 83-yard touchdown earlier this year. It's the longest run of the year so far. He has breakaway speed. He has size. He has strength. He can run somebody over. He can juke them out. He has some... And this is me not trying to be a Colts fan, but just watching Jonathan Taylor as a running back, he plays the game at that elite level. He had the second or third most rushing yards last year as a rookie, and he didn't even start all 16 games, and he's really just kind of continuing with that progress through this year and showing he's honestly playing even better than he did last year just based off the way I'm seeing him play. But again, I'm a Colts fan, so I get to really get a good look at him. He looks good. Now, the Jets' run defense, though, we're not just going to sit here and say that Jonathan Taylor is going to run all over them. However, the Jets boast a pretty solid run D. Bengals found that out just last week. I think, they had a total of like 41 yards on the ground or something or maybe it was Joe Mixon only had 41 yards. I remember the number being pretty low, though. Now, when you look at what the Jets allow, 4 yards per attempt, that puts them in the top 10 of the league. The big thing to note, though, with this here is that they've allowed 12 rushing touchdowns on the ground. So while they're maybe not necessarily letting up a ton of yards on the ground, specifically when it comes to getting the ball into the end zone, they struggle to keep running backs out of there. It's just second most in the league. Sorry, I thought I wrote that it was tied there. That is second most in the league with those 12 touchdowns. So if the Colts can open up the passing game a little bit, if Carson Wentz can not throw an interception, if Frank Reich cannot call screens in their own end zone, I mean, there's a lot of factors that have gone into some of the losses. I would say play calling, some poor decision-making by the quarterback. There's been a lot of things putting the Colts in bad positions and ultimately not playing well and losing to some really good teams. If they can play through the air really well and they can get themselves into the red zone, Jonathan Taylor should have an opportunity to maybe bust through and get himself into the end zone or maybe even break away some big runs on his own. Jonathan Taylor versus the Jets run D, I like the matchup. I think it should be a good one to watch because I'm curious to see how they handle somebody who is second in the league right now in rushing. And with Derrick Henry going down, I mean, the only way to take the number 1 spot at this point is to just have some pretty solid games. It's funny because Henry's like 300 and some odd yards ahead, so it's going to take a few weeks for anyone to catch up to him, but JT is in the number 2 spot behind him. The third key point, and this one I think is going to be a really big one and an interesting one to watch as well, has got to be the Colts pass rush going up against the Jets offensive line. The hope was that Micah Becton was going to be able to come back, and it sounds like he's not going to be able to. It looks like another week or two before he's going to be ready to roll, so that does kind of hurt the Jets' own line. But when we take a look at some of the statistics here, the Colts sit tied for 15th in the league with sacks, which is 17. Now, that's the same thing the Jets have, so they're both pretty even in that sort of category there. Now, the big thing for the Colts, though, and this is something that I've noticed watching them, is that their pressure rate honestly is awful, if I'm being quite frank with you guys. They are league worst at only 15.2% of pass plays bringing in pressure. So that's not necessarily like the blitz per se, but that's actually pressuring the quarterback. They only get pressure on the quarterback 15.2% of times. Now, or 15.2% of the plays that they rush the pass. So better way to say that. So with that in mind, you do have 17 sacks, puts you in the middle of the road, but you're not really good at causing pressure. We saw how good Mike White played last week, and I wouldn't say he was really under a ton of pressure. He did get sacked a few times, but overall, he played a really good game. He seemed pretty comfortable, and if you're the Colts and going into this game and you are not pressuring him at all, it seems like he can play the game well when he doesn't feel pressured. So you got to figure something out there. Maybe bring some blitzes. The guy lacks starting experience. He's only started in one game. He played half a game or so when Zach Wilson went out during the Patriots. So, I mean, he's got a game and a half under his belt at this point. You need to make sure you are bringing the pressure and flustering the offense they are trying to run there. Now, when you look at the Jets' numbers, the reason I'm bringing this up is because the Jets have allowed a total of 22 sacks this year. It's actually 25th worst in the league, so they're pretty low on that. And on top of that, when you look at their pass block rating, and this is per PFF, when you take all 5 of the linemen combined and you grade their pass rating, it is not very good. It is actually an average of 65.2. That's out of 100, so not a great number there. The Colts have a good opportunity to bring pressure and maybe get to the quarterback a little bit more, wreak some havoc there. Odeyingbo, debuted for them last week. Hopefully, as he continues to get more reps in and play more, he should become more effective, along with Kamoko Ture, who's been playing a little bit better than he has the last few years. And then you also look at their other draft pick, Kwity Paye. Hopefully, they can maybe, do some damage with what has been a pretty poor pass blocking unit so far in the New York Jets. Now, as for my final thoughts and just kind of what these two teams need to do to come out of this game successful here, the Jets, the big thing that has just really kind of shocked everyone is that they have 2 wins right now, and their 2 wins are over the Bengals, playoff contender, and the Titans, playoff contender. They've rattled off impressive wins over some really good teams, something that the Colts actually really have not done. Their wins have not been super impressive against who they've played. The Jets, though, have beaten 2 playoff contenders. At one point, people were looking at the Colts like, okay, they could be a team that makes another run for the playoffs. They just did last year. Carson Wentz, if he plays well, a playoff team again, potentially. And now at this point, I don't even know if they're going to make the playoffs with the way they're playing because they can't seem to finish games, and it's really becoming a problem for them. Now, whether the Jets are just being overlooked, maybe there's more talent than people realize, or maybe Mike White's the guy, which would be absolutely nuts considering they just drafted Zach Wilson. But there has to be questions being asked within that organization over how the hell Mike White just made that offense look better than it has in multiple years. I don't even think I want to say just this season. I would say in a while, the Jets are not that, they have not had a very prolific offense in quite some time. There's got to be people wondering how the hell that just happened. And what is Mike White doing that maybe Zach Wilson is not getting or doing himself? There's got to be some questions there. I think a big key for them is just trusting in Mike White and playing the game just like they did against the Bengals. Be aggressive, take some chances, and the Colts pass defense hasn't really been the best. They haven't been the best pass rushers either. Take advantage of that. I wouldn't try running against their defense because the Colts defense, running-wise, rush defense has been pretty effective in some stages. But ultimately, trust in Mike White. I like the wild card aspect of having him in there. You don't really know what you're going to get at this point because Mike White is 1-0 as a starter with the team. You can't look at this as the same Jets being led by Zach Wilson. I think it causes for a really fun little X factor for the game. For the Colts, despite dealing with some injuries, and I mean, the Jets are also dealing with them as well, so it can't be a real excuse, but those secondary injuries are starting to mount. They need to play some good pass defense. You cannot let Mike White take over this game because it's just going to be an issue if you come out of if the Colts can't rattle off a win in this game, that is going to be a big problem in general for them. I think ultimately trust in Jonathan Taylor. They need to start running the football more, and I think if they can focus on running the football and opening up those passing lanes some more, stop having Carson Wentz throw for so many passes a game, and give the football to Jonathan Taylor and focus on running with him, I think that they should be okay, and it should be a recipe for success for them in this game. Now, for the injury report, before we get into predictions and things like that, just some things to note. As I always mention this on every single Thursday night video, I record this the night prior to the game. So, Gravy, this is the second time in a row you have done this week, buddy. I need you to get off the desk. Scoot for me. Thank you. All right. The Jets. What are we dealing with injury-wise? Doubtful. Corey Davis, he's dealing with a hip thing. Sounds like he's probably not going to play just based off of the reports and stuff that I looked at. But he is doubtful. There's possible things for that to change. Again, I'm recording this a day prior to the game. I don't necessarily know what any of this is going to shake out for people that are like questionable and doubtful, but this is what I'm getting right now as I record. On top of that, for people that are out, Zach Wilson, obviously. Running back Tevin Coleman has also been listed as out, and also defensive end Bryce Huff. So they do have some injuries, and granted, like the other people that have been injured for a while now, I'm not going into that detail. This is just like most recent injuries to keep note of going into this game. As for the Colts, this was a surprise one because I didn't hear anything about this up until today, Wednesday. Questionable. Guard Quentin Nelson. Not sure what that's all about. I expect him to still play just because this kind of came out of nowhere. I think if they were really worried about anything, he'd be listed as maybe doubtful or something, but it is something to keep an eye on, and it definitely will hurt this Colts offensive line going into this game. As for people that are out, defensive tackle Tyquan Lewis with his knee, he ended up getting hurt during last week's game, and it sounds like he's going to be potentially out for a while. Safety Kari Willis was downgraded from doubtful to out today, and then wide receiver T.Y. Hilton has also been listed as out with a concussion. So, handful of injuries on both sides of the team, or both sides of the football here for both the Jets and the Colts. Things to keep an eye on and just make note of as we head into this game. Now, as for the actual predictions and what I think is going to go down, I have a bold prediction for both teams. The first one being, with the injuries in the Colts secondary and just their inability to keep teams out of the end zone through the air, I have Mike White pegged for 260-plus yards on the day with 3 touchdowns. I definitely think it's possible the way the secondary has struggled with letting people into the end zone, and it's something that I could see as a very realistic possibility. I don't know if the yardage total is going to reach that 400 mark again, but I could definitely see him hitting like 260-plus yards, maybe even creep into the high 200s or low 300s as well. As for the Colts' bold prediction here, like I said, they should trust in Jonathan Taylor. They need to continue feeding him the ball. He is such a good runner. He's so good in open space. And he honestly, in my opinion, is one of the emerging backs and has the potential to be one of the best backs in the league. And that's like Colts fan bias aside. I love the way he plays the game and just his ability to make something out of nothing. It feels special. He's not quite there yet, but he's definitely getting there. I have him pegged for 105 yards plus and 2 touchdowns as well. I think if they trust in their run game, they can be very successful in this one. And as for my final score prediction, the big one that everyone's been waiting for my final score, while I think Mike White's going to have a strong game, I am picking the Colts on this one here at a score of 28-21. The wild card for Mike White kind of steers me away from picking the Jets in this one. While I would not be surprised with the Jets winning this game based off the struggles Indianapolis has had and obviously the unknown of Mike White, that's probably the biggest reason that's also going to steer me away from the Jets. I trust in Carson Wentz a little bit more than I do Mike White, and that's not really saying much, but it is at least something. As for the wide receiver groups on both sides, there's a lot of injuries. I like Jonathan Taylor a little bit more than the running back they have there, so I think that the Colts offense can put up a little bit more points in this one. And also, I think after seeing what happened to the Bengals, there's going to be an emphasis for the Colts defense to make sure that that same thing does not happen to them. But that is my preview for Thursday night. Let me know who you guys think is going to win in the comment section down below. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day. I am again Athan Hristodulu, and I appreciate you all for taking the time to watch. Have a good rest of your Thursday night and enjoy some football.